Hello plant people, how are you guys doing today? If you're new around here, my name is Ashley and I'm a soil scientist, and on today's video we're talking about the dreaded Canadian thistle. This is the gift Canadians have given to basically all of North America, and I'm sure it's invasive in some areas of Europe, Australia, you name it. It is a very insidious, noxious weed that we have developed, but the rules apply actually to any weed that falls into this family, and we'll go over exactly what this family is, or what this characteristic of what this plant has that makes it particularly good at invading our gardens. Now, this actually is funny because the methods and the science we're about to apply to Canada thistle and just thistles in general actually converts over into the houseplant world, and what we call a stem on a lot of our aroids, monsteras, rhaphidophores is actually technically the same mechanism that makes these Canadian thistles so insidious in our gardens. So if you are into plants indoors or out, then this video is definitely for you. Now, this video is completely inspired by my friend Curie, and she's in Pickering, Ontario. She also has a YouTube channel, so you guys should definitely check that out. But she's a micro homesteader, and she had a thistle patch where a deck used to reside, and so she took the deck out because she's a micro homesteader, so she's trying to utilize all the piece of land that she has, which is not a ton of it, to grow food. And so her question was, can I put a raised bed over top of essentially a thistle garden? And the answer is yes, but there is some things that you need to take into consideration when choosing to put a raised bed in an area that thistle has resided. So let's get into the science of why this is so noxious and how we can take care of it both in our garden if we're putting something on top of it, or just in general once it starts to break out. So Canada thistle has a very unique root system, and I'm sure you guys have heard of this root system before. It is called the rhizome root system, and so a common misconception is that the actual stem that comes down and then goes sideways both ways is the root, and this isn't the case. It's actually a modified stem, and so this stem has nodes on it similar to what we see above ground with tomatoes, and out of those nodes we have meristematic stem cell tissue, meaning we have undifferentiated stem cell tissue that has not yet decided what its role in the environment is. So if this meristematic stem cell tissue is above ground, exposed to light, low levels of moisture and sunshine, then we end up with leaves. If the rhizome root, or the rhizome stem, which is technically a modified stem, is below ground, out of the sun, high moisture, and obviously soil on top, we end up with roots. This is why when we dig thistle out, or when we dig quackgrass out, we see this root come down, and then we see these borderline parallel, almost stem-like looking roots that are actually not roots. They're modified stems that lack chlorophyll, and the reason for the lack in chlorophyll is because the lack of sun exposure, meaning chlorophyll was never needed for the survival of that area of the plant. Now, this is what makes it so insidious, and this is what makes it so hard to remove. So a lot of plant people will tell you you have to get every little bit of root out, because if you don't, it will come back, and they are not wrong. However, they're not 100% right either, because when we actually break that rhizome, yes, it is like Medusa's head. It is similar to when we do a cutting with a houseplant. It is similar to when we do a cutting with a basil plant or a herb. We end up with two new stems. Same thing happens underground, because again, it's a stem, it's not a root. However, we don't actually have to get every single bit of root hair out. The main concern is actually removing that parallel root system. So that initial taproot that comes down, and then any offshoots that go to the side, that is what needs to be removed. If you leave some root hairs in place, you will not have thistle come back. So Don't waste your time sitting there with tweezers. You actually just have to remove that rhizobial stem and you will be a-okay. Now, with that being said, this obviously is not always possible because when we remove it, we obviously know when we stick a spade in the ground, when we stick a rake in the ground, when we even stick pitchforks in the ground, we are going to snap something and we're going to snap some sort of root. And so this is not always the case. So we have to use both the removal of the root in combination with exhausting the root system. So Carrie did this in her video where she actually goes through, removes the upper biomass, and then tries to remove as much as that rhizobial root system as possible. So she's trying to remove all those modified stems out of the soil in hopes of reducing the Medusa head coming back the next year. This is not always possible. You're going to have some plants pop up. So your next best effort is actually to exhaust the root system, which will in turn exhaust the plant. So we know that this is a modified stem, therefore we just have to wear it out and we have to be stronger than the actual plant itself. So because the root below ground has low amounts of chlorophyll and is unable to photosynthesize, we simply just have to remove the photosynthesis that feeds that root or that stem down below. Meaning, as the plant pops up, we can simply clear cut the heads off and remove the upper foliage, or we can place something on top, such as cardboard or a thick layer of soil. The goal is to exhaust it in hopes that the lower roots will rot. So we can use clear plastic to try to burn them out. We can use a no-dig garden method to burn them out, or we can use actual manual removal. The key is that if we do the manual removal, we don't simply just yank, we want to clip because we don't want to disturb the root below and end up with 2 more shoots. Unless if we are going to be very on top of it, we can rip and tear, and then that is just going to cause more subdivision and more energy put into output of new plant. But if we are on top of it, we can't actually feed the new plants coming up, and therefore eventually we will see those roots get shorter and skinnier and smaller over time, and that means that your stems are slowly disappearing and you're losing that energy reserve that that plant needs to grow. So seeds aren't so much of the issue when it comes to a rhizome plant. It is actually the root system that we need to exhaust. Now, interestingly enough, because that rhizome is a modified stem, there are other cases where this happens. So stolon type plants are a modified stem. This is not a root system and they're nearly identical to each other. So a great example of this would be certain types of grasses and strawberries and stolons and even peanuts. So stolons actually run on the surface of the soil. They don't go under the soil. They reside on the surface of the soil, and rhizomes go under. So if you guys are looking to do a raised bed on top of a past thistle type patch area or any rhizome based noxious weed, then you want to remove as much as that rhizome as possible and then actually layer on top in hopes of ending the life cycle of that noxious weed. So best place to start with any weed removal, any tactic that you're trying with weed removal is actually to research the root system of the plant to determine if tilling is going to work or if mechanical manipulation has to take place. So with a thistle patch, unfortunately, if you have thistle in your garden, if you do not have a no-dig system and you are tilling, this is going to exacerbate the issue and make it much worse. Now, if you have a fibrous root system that isn't seed-based, then a rototiller actually is going to be hugely beneficial to you because it's going to dig up those roots. So there's a time and place for both options, but if you are fighting sow thistle, Canadian thistle, regardless of what it is, if it has a rhizome type root system, quackgrass, do not rototill. You will make your life an absolute nightmare because you are going to be fighting a lot of little baby Medusa heads that will be popping up over time. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to check out Carrie, and let's get her to 1,000 subscribers. She's a fellow Canadian gardener, so let's support her as much as possible. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.